Hello, Internet. I'm excited like always. I can tell you what's following in front of me. I was at the show at the Voortrekker Monument. And suddenly this man approached and he was talking and he said, "Man, I got to speak to you," and all these things. And I was very busy, so I was like, I just handed him over to a friend of mine, Anita, to keep him busy while I'm busy here on the other side. But he kept on coming at me, and so here we are today. I'm really looking forward to this. His name is Gary. He's got a different name as well, which he can produce because I can't, and I don't want to verkrach the man's name here. That would be disrespectful. And besides that, you can see on his grey hair when you see him now that he was at Savannah, and he's part of my wife's tribe. And you know, I like those people very much. Really good people. And they're always welcome. Yeah, I want to say to all of you guys from the Jewish faith and the Jewish background, guys, you've got a friend in legacy. So tell me, Gary, what happened, my man? How did the Jewish boy end up in the South African Army again?
Well, I went to Pretoria Boys High. I grew up in Pretoria. I'm still in Pretoria, South Africa, And I got my call-up papers in Form 4, which is Standard 9 in my terms. And I actually was one of those youngsters who enjoyed a bit of a challenge. And not like my friends, they were all trying to say, get out of it and go to university first and try and be a cook or a office clerk or whatever. But I thought, no. Anyway, so Standard 9, around that, the military sent a deputation to the school, and they said, we're going to offer a course in signals during the school holidays. And if you want to come along, you'll hopefully get a certificate afterwards, and that will help you in your military career when you go into your national service. So off I went Saturday 9, 3 weeks to number 2 Signals Regiment, Voortrekker Hoogte, and with about 8 or 9 other guys. I graduated with that certificate, and I could work the radios, and that's what it was. Anyway, first day, I could get my call-up papers in December 1974, my matric year, and it said 4th Field Regiment, Potchefstroom. Board the train, and early January, and all my friends, nobody knew what 4th Field Regiment was or what they did. Some said it's guys that clean the grass, and no clue. Anyway, off I went, and I still remember on that train from Pretoria to Potch was a guy looking at me, and he was a bombardier. I thought it was a corporal. We didn't know that, artillery, it's bombardiers. And his name was, I still recall his face at that time, Duncan Matushek. And Duncan we'll talk about later, who now lives in New Zealand. And anyway, so we got to Potch, eventually in a queue, and one by one, and I get to the front of the queue, and the guy said, what's your academic qualifications? And I pull out the certificate, and I pull out my matric certificate, and the guy's starting getting a bit excited. He says, I see you got a first class maths and science. I said, yeah. He says, oh, we've been waiting for you. we need 20 guys that have a matric maths and science, and you'll go there. But anyway, you still got to get through basics, and there were 300 of us, just over 300, and we were assigned to 1 medium battery, 4th Field Regiment. Now, 1 medium battery was a battery of 8 140 millimeter guns, and they called them the 5.5s, which originated during the Second World War. Our battery commander was a full lieutenant, Johan Potgieter, later to get the honoris causa in Savannah. And we went through quite a tough, probably tougher than most, but it's all basics are tough right through the military in those years. And got through, and it's thinned out to about 150 guys from the 300 that completed basics. We did, after basics, we were divided up into gun crew, drivers, signalers, which I was hoping to be, but it wasn't to be, and TAs. And they selected 20 TAs that had maths and science. And I'll just explain to you what a TA is briefly. A TA is a technical assistant. And those are the guys that sit in their little vehicle with two small windows at this long desk. And they give the calculations, they do the calculations, and how to lay and bear the guns. So it has to be done pretty quickly, and there's a lot of people think it's a simple thing. You shoot the gun and you tell left, right, up or down. Well, it doesn't work that way. So the artillery that we had was ex-Second World War. And in fact, every shot that was even fired in basic training with those guns was recorded. And being a TA, you would get in the vehicle this logbook, and you would see, okay, the date that this gun was last fired, this specific gun was fired, and what the charge was, and the range, and all these things were calculated, and record was kept. The guns that we were using then were previously used in El Alamein. That's how far back the stuff went. But they were still big. Those guns weighed 7 tons apiece, and they were pulled by a Magirus-Deutsch diesel gun tractor that housed the crew, and they were manhandled by this gun crew of 10. And we were divided up into 2 troops of 4 gunners and a troop commander, which was normally either second in command of the battery, became the troop commander, and he would get an assistant, and the assistant would be myself, a TA, who didn't want to sit in a little vehicle because he might get claustrophobic, which is what my problem was. So I preferred to be out and about. And he would work, the assistant would work the radio and assist the officer commanding, who was always the OP. The commanding officer of the battery was an OP. The assistant was the OP. The troop commander was an OP. So the most senior guy would be the guy that would go forward and get a visual on the enemy target. And between the two of him and the assistant would get that information back to the TA van. And at the TA van, there would be a gun position officer, and there would be 2 TAs sitting there inside there, and the bearings would be relayed back to them, and altitude and the latitude and all that info, and the approximate distance, and they would do these quick calculations. We had something called a range manual, which assisted the whole effect, the end result. Because with the 5.5s, there were different types of charges. So the 5.5 is a projectile. It weighed 40 kilograms and a pretty devastating weapon. And it had a fuse fitted on it, and you got different types of fuses. You would get an impact fuse, a fuse 117, or you get an airburst fuse, which could be set to explode at a certain altitude as it got closer to the ground. And that info had to be given from the OP back to the TA van. The TA guys would then calculate what type of charge. We would put in the charge was calculated in little bags, canvas sacks, and there was a low, medium, and a high, and a supercharge, which was a combination of two of those, which gave the gun a maximum range of approximately 18 to 20 kilometers. So we went through all that, and there was quite an interesting calculation that we used to have to do as well. It's called the calculation of the Coriolis effect, and you can Google that. And the Coriolis effect is essentially when you find a target and you fire a projectile at that specific target, the projectile is, although it's moving, but it's moving in a steady direction, but the rotation of the Earth has rotated at a speed. So generally at maximum range, if you fire directly at the target 18 k's away, the projectile could be in the air for over 30 seconds. And but now the Earth has moved. So it's going to be 400-500 meters, either to the right, left, or depending on if, which way you're facing, north or south. But that is all calculated. So it's pre-calculated, also barometric conditions, altitude of the target in related to where the gun sits. These all determine that. But anyway, so we went, this was a 6-week course that we did in that. We would go to the classroom in the day. The gun guys would go and learn, how to manhandle the gun and fire and do that. And then the signalers and the drivers of the vehicles would also go on their driving course in the day. But every second day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the first time it came around, didn't know what the senior officer was saying. He said to us, guys, we're going this afternoon to do the Gazala Gallop. Now, the Gazala Gallop, if anyone knows history, Gazala Gallop was an incident that took place around about during El Alamein, where the South African troops with the exact same guns that we were using were encircled by the Germans, and General Montgomery, or Field Marshal Montgomery, gave the order to surrender, but spike the guns. So spike the guns means you put a round in the front of the barrel, and you put a projectile in the back, into the back of the barrel, and you fire it, and it explodes the barrel, and it's unusable. So it says spike the gun, surrender. Well, a battery of this exact same battery that we served in said, no, we'll do that. We'll break through these German lines, and we will run with the guns. Now, those guns are 7 tons, and I can tell you now, through the desert, where the sand is soft, 10 guys, it's an immense feat. Anyway, we used to have to go and do this, everybody, all the gunners at that point, every second day would go and do a Gazala. So we take these guns, 12 guys on a gun, and we just run through these dongas. And it might have been 10, 15 Ks, and it's an incredibly tiring exercise, that I can tell you. Anyway, so we finished that, and at the end of the day, I was selected to be the OP assistant of the troop commander, and the troop commander was Second Lieutenant Bernie Pulse. And but of course, South Africa at that time was fighting an unconventional warfare. So we were mostly SWAPO to the terrorist type, small group patrols. There wasn't really much of a need for artillery, especially this heavy artillery. So we got through that, and now we were told we're going to be doing border duty as infantry. So we went on a coin-op training course, and we were divided up into sections eventually. And because I knew how to work the radio, I was a radio guy, to my detriment. The reason is that the radio guy, if you're walking a patrol on the border, there'll be the section commander or section leader. The radio guy's got to stay pretty close to the troop leader, but not too close. So if you had walked into terrorist activity, SWAPO, and of course we wore no rank on the border whatsoever, but they would always, the terrorists would try and look for the guy with the radio, and the guy closest to him would be the troop, the section leader, commander, and that would be the first guy that would be taken out. So we were sent eventually up to Quando Base Camp, which is around about, we landed at Mapacha Air Force Base, and we were taken by a vehicle to Quando. It's pretty near Katima Malilu. And the base camp Quando at that time might have been 40 or 50 guys in the camp, and it was a totally self-contained camp. And we had to get into the routine, of doing patrols and the running of the camp. And into day 3, I was taught, when 4 of you go to the gates, and there were 2 like pull boxes at the gate, and each had a Bren gun, and a Bren gunner and a Bren number 2. We would take turns, and when a vehicle approached the camp, they would radio in. One of the guys would run out, open the gate. The 2 Bren gunners would cover the back of the vehicle. The vehicle would come in, the gate would be closed, and the vehicle would drive into the center of the camp. It might have brought ammunition, food, rations, we don't know. Anyway, I go for my first session, and I am in a vehicle approaches, not a problem. I'm on the Bren gun, and the Bren gun is loaded, and as you know, it's a fixed firing pin. So the slide is at the back where it's cocked, and it's a fixed pin, so there's no hammer action on the Bren machine gun. And I did my thing. I went and I ran. The first vehicle came, and I ran around, and you were supposed to run around the back of this pull box into the back and back just to and take chances, either Bren gun number 1 or Bren number 2. And anyway, the next vehicle comes along, the guys in the other pull box next to us, it's their chance. The guy that gets out, a bit of a joker at the time. You always had this 1 or 2 jokers in your bungalow. And his name was Van Asweken, and he ran around, and he opened the gate, and the vehicle drove in, and he closed the gate, and he thought he was going to be a big truck, but he would dive through the front of where the Bren gun was. And he did that, and a round went off. And the round went in the top here, in the top of the shoulder, came out the bottom of the kidneys. Anyway, there was a hell of a loop. We had a doctor, I think we had 2 doctors in the base camp, and they stabilized him, and a chopper came in and took him off, and that was the last we heard. Every time we'd asked somebody in charge, where's Van Asweken, how's he doing? They would say, no, he's in 1 mil, whatever. The actual real story never came out. At our 40th reunion of Savannah, I sat next to one of the doctors, and I said, what happened to Van Asweken? He said he died on the Alouette Stadium. Anyway, so then I realized this is not fun and games. This is the real thing. So we went on our first patrol. And I'm the signaller. I had the radio on my back, and 14 spare rounds. That was standard battle pack for a 4-day patrol. And we had a tracker dog, Alsatian, and a tracker, and we had a bushman who would track. So there were about 14 of us on this section patrol, and we would walk. It's quite a long patrol. We would walk about 40, 50 meters to the south of the cut line, and you could see the cut line, that strip, the Caprivi strip, and different types of bush went through, and it was hot. And of course, at midday, you would rest. And take a rondom for verdediging, the temporary base, and carry on. So 11 o'clock on day one, and I'm a signaller, and when we walked, we had a round in the chamber of your R1, and the R1 would be on safe, and being right-handed, it would be on my inside thumb, the safe button. And of course, I had the radio and 2 spare batteries. My kit was a little heavier than most, and rations for 4 days. And the way I would walk was always my finger on the trigger, but you'd feel that the weapon is in safe mode, because a little bit of tension, and you could feel it's not going to go any further because it's unsafe. And for some unknown reason, at 11 o'clock on day one, the safe button got caught on my web belt, and I didn't realize that. And I went into the fire mode, and I pulled the trigger, and of course, a round went off. And immediately, the whole troop, the whole section, hit the ground. The section commander, and I said, I was actually praying to myself, this can't be me. It's not. Hopefully, it's not me, but it was. So, the section commander hit the ground, and we had an LMG there. He just started going off. We were under attack, so whatever it was. And Alan Jacobs, the section leader, turned around and said to me, "Gary, where's the attack coming from?" And I said, "Oh, sorry, let it off." Anyway. Immediately thereafter, the radio goes, "Skoot gehoor, het julle kontak?" So, of course, I was in no state to answer. Alan took the radio and said, no, carry on, it's just a slight problem. We thought so, but it wasn't. Anyway, carried on. First night, we got to do a little temporary base, rondom verdediging, and one guy sleeps, one guy's awake, and you form a circle, and we have a little piece of string and rope, and if something happens, you call, and you can't light a fire, there's no light, there's no nothing. 9 o'clock that night, the guy I was with was Wayne Jacobs, still remember him, and it was his chance to sleep. I'm awake, and we hear elephants. And they're getting closer, and they're getting closer. And I just look up, and I see this looming elephant, and Alan, who's in the center, says, "Guys, don't shoot, don't fire, don't fire, don't fire, hold your fire." And he kept saying it. But I realized this thing's going to walk all over me and the rest of us. And the tracker that we had, he could see pretty well at night, what the Bushman trackers. He let off one round and hit the elephant behind the ear, and the elephant, to the kill shot, one round, and it dropped. Of course, then again, radio goes, "Het julle kontak?" No, tell the whole story quickly, and they say, "Okay, just stay at that base. We will send the choppers in to have a look tomorrow morning." Anyway, about 4 or 5 arrows came in the next morning, and a lot of big brass from Katima as well. They all came to get mementos from this elephant, took it on. We carried on with the patrol, and it was pretty successful. Anyway, a week or two later, 10 days later, we get a message in the base. "Guys, the Minister of Defense is coming around to lift the base, and we're going to do a bit of a fire demonstration." Very great. And he's going to talk to you guys. So, round about 2 o'clock that next afternoon, we all go around and man the base, and 2 choppers come in and they land outside the base, and they drive in comes PW Buerta, and he's wearing his hat, the traditional hat, and his open neck shirt, but with his jacket, and that sort of crisscross jacket that became his trademark. There was the PW. Anyway, we did the fire and power demonstration. We all threw a few hand grenades, quite a hand grenade, made it look very impressive, I must say, and we had great fun. Anyways, start feed, ceasefire, the minister will met julle praat. So he gathered us around. He said, listen, guys, tomorrow you're going to fight in Angola. And do your thing for the country, and the whole story, and carry on with that. And he leaves. The next day, 30 of us get on to 3 or 4 Bedfords. We get 2 90mm armored cars, and we head off straight from Kwanda base camp, straight into Angola as infantry. And we drove for 3 or 4 days, and we landed up on the banks of the Bambanganda River, where we set up a base, and we would send out patrols. And what the intention was that, of course, the Civil War had started at that point in Angola, and the result was that a lot of these SWAPO who weren't involved at that time were now fleeing back towards Southwest Africa, but they were generally in small groups, 2s and 3s. And they would walk along the banks of this river, the Bambanganda River. And so we would send out patrols, and we'd find spoor every second day, and we'd lay an ambush, and that would be the end of that small group. Anyway, after 3 weeks, I think at that point, the guys were already starting to get battle fatigue. I mean, living with around up your rifle all the time, and on safe, and continue, it takes its toll. Anyway, we're told to come back to not Kwanda base camp. We were told to go back to Patron Air Force Base, which was about 10 k's from Kwanda, I think. Anyway, we get back to Mapacha Air Force Base, and we are treated like heroes. And there's no parades, there's no nothing. And the guys say, just hang in there for a few days. We've got something else in mind. And we ate, and we slept, and we drank, and it was a bit of a rest. We had a rest period. And then they said, okay, guys, we're going to fly you to Grootfontein. And at Grootfontein, you will meet up with your guns, which are being transported all the way from Potch up to Grootfontein, and you're going to resume your artillery role. So we flew from Apache to Grootfontein, got off, and there our guns were waiting, and we were herded into a big hangar. And there might have been, the whole battery was there now from the various camps, and our old battery as we comprised. And I'm not sure if PW Buerta addressed us, but I do know it was, there was General Milan, and they erected a stage, and he said, listen, guys, you're going to join up the main battle thrust into the center of Angola. No mention was made of the operation name. I only learned many years later it was called Operation Savannah. And we're going to issue you with foreign uniforms. You will speak no Afrikaans. You will speak only English. Anything with the Made in South Africa label will be removed, but we're going to pay you handsomely. He said, but you're going to have to sign a non-disclosure document. And at this point, he said, if anybody wants to leave, please do so now. About 5 or 6 guys did get up and leave, and we never saw them again. Anyway, we signed that. We signed our last will and testament again, second time. And we got onto the guns, and we went, this troop of 8 guns, a battery of 8 guns, just crossed the border with armored cars, and we just drove up that center. It split up into 2. So the one troop of guns went into Battle Group Orange, which was sort of went down the coast side. We were in Foxbat, and Foxbat went down the center of Angola. And we had a couple of incidents where we had to get out and do our OP story, find the enemy, and we deployed the guns, and we were pretty successful. But it was fast moving. It was enemy bestooken, OP go out, the guns would do their thing, hitch up, carry on, and there were no delays, and we moved faster. And eventually we got to this place, and a little village called Cela, C-E-L-A, and Cela was a hospital, had a hospital in the middle of it, which the South African forces had taken over and used it. And we put the guns out, and we were told, okay, there's a bridge, and we're not quite sure how they're going to cross the bridge. We're not sure if it's in one condition or blown at all. And this is late November. So early December, I get told, Bernie Paulson and myself, you're going on a patrol, can't tell you what for. Well, Bernie knew, I didn't. And we're going to give you 5 parabats as escort, and it's going to be a 4-day patrol, and you're actually going to lay mines. So I wasn't quite sure what the hang that was. Anyway, so I was a radio operator. So you take your 20 magazines, not your normal 14. You take 2 hand grenades, which are clipped on there. I had the radio on my back, 2 or 3 spare batteries, 4 days rations, and they then strapped a mine to my chest, big mine. And off we went. And I had no map, but I just followed Bernie, and we walked line abreast almost. And these parabats that came with us, they were heavily armed. They had LMGs and they had Brens, and they were armed to the teeth. And into day 1, early afternoon, and the vegetation was thick, and it was raining, and it was wet. There was a flash of something to our left, a movement through the bushes. And of course, the parabats, everybody dropped. The parabats started letting loose with their rifle and the machine gun. And it was anyway, Bernie Paul says, okay, guys, start fear. We need to go and see what this is. Anyway, but there was no incoming fire. So yeah, they did find that there was an AK-47 magazine lying there, so there was something there. But at that point, I thought, okay, I've let off 3/4 of a magazine of R1, and I think I wasn't counting. Normally, what you would do, you'd count the number of rounds, and when you got to 18 or 19, you got 1 or 2 rounds left, and the next one you're going to have to do, change magazines. Now, with all that equipment on me, and the magazine changing procedure was, you would roll over, take the magazine off, take the new one, put the old one back into the kidney pouch, and then do another couple of rolls. And I thought, hang, if I'm going to have to do this under fire, it's going to be one hell of a mission. So I thought, okay, change magazines now. And I looked down, and the butt of my rifle was just full of blood. Just blood. I called Bernie. I said, Bernie, I think I'm hit, but I feel nothing. I've been hit. So he comes over. He says, yes. He says, no. What's happened is you hit the ground so hard that my sights on my rifle have hit my forehead, and any head wound, a bit of a scratch, there's just net blood, all over. Anyway, they patched me up and we carried on. Today, and we're walking along, and we're walking up very, very quietly, and Bernie said, we've got enemy up front. So now we leopard crawl, and we got to crawling next to Bernie, and about 40, 50 meters away, we get to this river. And on the banks of this river, about 30 or 40 Cubans are swimming, they're washing their clothes, and nobody is aware that there's somebody watching them. So Bernie says, listen, I'm going to leave you here. You wait here with the radio and these guys. I need to go in an easterly direction, and I need to go and have a look at something. So he tootles off leopard crawling, and he's gone for about an hour. And now we're watching these Cubans washing in the river, and I've got my radio, and I know how to play with the radio, and I tune in, and never forget, to the English service of SABC, whatever it was called in those years. And I'm listening on the headpiece, and I'm watching the guys swimming. And it was a cricket match they were commentating on. I can still recall it was Charles Fortune. And Charles, I think it could have been the Wanderers. And Charles was saying, and if you remember the cricket in the old days, towards December time, there would always be an international touring team coming to South Africa. And I think it was England that was playing. I think they could have been playing Transvaal. And Charles Fortune was saying, there's a flock of birds on the pitch, and he was going really over, and it's held up the bowler can't bowl because they're now birds. And, here I am in the middle of the heart of Angola. Bernie comes back, and he says, give me the radio. And everything was done in code. There was no direct speaking and English. So he said, give me the code form. I gave it to him. From what I can recall, he seemed to intimate that the bridge had been blown. That would have been Bridge 14. Anyway, he says, they give us orders, return. So we return to where we are. It takes us another day and a half, and we get back. We go back to our positions. And the next day, they send up Lieutenant Potgieter and Liebenberg to the top of Hippo Hill. That must have been around about the 2nd or the 3rd of December, 75. And nothing happens. So we go back to the gun positions, and there's nothing. The guns are sitting there, and around about the 7th of December, Commandant Joffel van der Westhuizen, who was the artillery commander of the area, calls us, and he said, listen, I'm pulling Potgieter and Liebenberg back down from Hippo. We want you, Bernie Pass and myself, you go up to Hippo and take over the OP role there. But we think there's going to be one hell of a fight because that bridge has been blown, which what Bernie had reported on. And so again, the next morning, we were dropped off Again, 20 rounds, magazine rounds, the usual kit, but no mine this time. More water, more rations. Again, my 2 hand grenades, and we set off. And we walk in easterly direction and through the pineapple fields, and then back down to where the main road was, and then we started ascending the back of Hippo Hill. I'm trying to, I suppose, to try and contact Jan Purkita coming down, and eventually I get comms and we meet, and he hands us the map of what he thinks is the gun positions of the enemy, but he's not sure because they're so well camouflaged, and there'd be no activity whatsoever. So the 2 of us, we ascend, and we decide to, let's get right to the top of Hippo Hill, which was overlooking to my right the Bridge 14, and we summited probably about 4:30, 5 in the afternoon, and it was pouring with rain, and it was dark, and we couldn't make out very much. So we decided to call it, we'll bed down for the night, and we get a nice position, and we had 1 binoculars, and I would look through the binoculars for half an hour. Bernie would look. You can't look at through binoculars continually. It's an incredible strain on your eyes. So about 7:30, now it's pitch dark, and now we can't make a little fire. Couldn't use my esprit to make a cup of coffee, nothing. But all of a sudden, in front of us, below us, erupts like a fireworks demonstration, but things going off, and all of a sudden, the radio goes, and it's Joffel van der Westhuizen, and he's saying, guys, we're under attack here from these positions. We need some bearings. We need to return fire. And so we tried to identify in the dark, but there's nothing to identify. You can't see a hill, you can't see any landmarks, you can see nothing. And you don't know if it's your a projectile landing, exploding, or an outgoing one towards you. And if we weren't effective at all. And after about 10-15 minutes, Joffel came on, and he started screaming in Afrikaans. He said, "Luister hier, Savannah," which he's not supposed to, but I think he lost his cool. He says, "As julle manne nie daai tekens uitwis, gaan ons dood wees." So we're trying our best. Anyway, it just suddenly stopped. The enemy fire just suddenly stopped. It must have been about 45 minutes after it first started. And we stopped firing. And we go through the night, and we can't move, but we're overlooking the positions. And early the next morning, for a brief period of time, the cloud lifted, and to my right, I could clearly see about 400-500 meters away, the bottom of the hill, the bridge, and it was totally blown. And in front of us, right in front of us, stretching between 10 and 20 k's, was just Cuban positions all dug in, and you could clearly see that in your binoculars. And Rudy just said to me, "Listen, if these oaks get over, we're going to be smoking cigars in Savannah, because we're going to have to fight for our lives." And that's when the Bridge 14 started, the main thrust. And we would slowly knock out the closer positions, but the Cubans had positioned their heavy stuff so far back that even our 5.5s couldn't reach the target. And we could clearly see those BM-21s firing out of the mist. and you would just see these red trails, and they would come over you, and you knew in 30, 40 seconds before they hit the guns, and we would be screaming into the radio. I was harder to the trenches, and that's how it went forward. But we couldn't reach them. And they obviously started realizing that there had to be an enemy, being us, observer. And they were starting to rake that Hippo Hill with fire. And we obviously realized if we move, they're going to see us, and then everything's going to be. But that fire was intense on us and on the gun positions. And then Bernie got the message, listen, we're going to do a leapfrog. So the manual for the 5.5 gun says the safe way of firing is 1 minute per round. So in other words, that gives the gunner time to clear the barrel out, swab the barrel, cool it down, and get the next shot ready. And that's probably what the Cubans thought, that we will stick to that. They knew what kind of weapons we had. So the only way to do it was to close one gun down, increase the fire rate on the other three at that point. We did have some other guns which moved up during that battle from 14th Field. And I think it was Lieutenant Chris Nell who was the second gun position officer, but we still directed most of all the 5.5s. And that's how we did it. So they would move forward right up as close as we could get to the backside of Hippo Hill, and we would gain 3 or 4 kilos. And eventually, after a couple of hours of intense firing, and I mean intense, so intense that we had a gun that I could see was losing range. And it's losing range because it's barrel wear. And so we detected that gun. The Tiffies under fire came forward, and they rotated the barrel of the 155 180 degrees. And that almost sorted that problem out, back to almost the 18.5 range. And at that point, we were then able to take out those far targets. Now, all this is carrying on for about 3 or 4 days. And we took out one by one BM-21s, but still they had mortars firing, and the mortars, we couldn't actually see the target, and the firing just kept going and going, and all the time our engineers were rebuilding the bridge. So we had to cross that bridge to get to Luanda. So they would be cutting down trees and building this bridge out of wood logs, and we would be able to see that. And when they started getting to that open area, we'd try and increase the fire, to sort of try and keep the Cuban heads down. But what we noticed was that some of the rounds weren't exploding, and realized that the ground was so wet that the impact fuses just wouldn't detonate. So we then swapped to airburst. Now, when you're in training in Potchefstroom on the artillery range, you don't really get to see the effect of an airburst shell because you can't be there on the other side. And so we swapped to airburst, and we would just fire these into that area. And that was the most devastating thing, because it would spray white hot shrapnel over a range, 40, 50 meters, and whatever was there would be slaughtered. And that was the word. It's not a great word, but that was the reality of it. And of course, they were trying to, and our biggest excitement was, I was looking through the binoculars and the battle was ongoing, and I see out of 20, 30 k's away, can see a vehicle coming down towards the Cuban positions. And I hand the binoculars up to Bernie, and he looks and he says, this is a Cuban ammunition truck. They're coming to rearm the waters, and let's give it a go. So the vehicle must have been moving at about 60, 70 k's an hour, and Bernie gave me the order, gave me the bearings. I sent it back to the gun position, and the first shot came off. It landed about 150 meters in front of the vehicle. So readjusted 5, and now you've got to bear in mind the vehicle's still moving, and we've got about a 15, 20-second delay. So a little bit of thumb suck, try and get that bearing right. The next one landed behind, and the third shot hit the target almost flat on it, and it burst. It just exploded, and when the smoke cleared, it was gone, and we hit that. So that to hit a moving target with a stationary gun from that range was quite an incredible feat. We got up there on the Sunday. On the Thursday, we looked down at that bridge, and it appeared as if it was usable. And Bernie gave me the order. Again, Afrikaans, not supposed to, but we didn't have that type of coding. He just said, okay, tell them to steer punches vorentoe. So a troop of armor, 90mm armor, started crossing the bridge, and it held. And it was early in the morning, and I could hear when I gave the order, steer punches vorentoe, I could hear them behind me to my right start those engines of the heavy, and it reverberated, and these cars went over it, and they got over, and they split up into the veldswelters, shrub, heavy bush, and we had no any incoming fire from that area for the last day or two, so we presumed we knocked them all those positions out. But out of the bush came these rockets at the armor, and the issue was that our guns at that point were at maximum range and firing at maximum range, and not at the 1 or 2 kilometers that we were looking at in front of us. And they came under, there was, somebody told me later what it was. It was these rocket-assisted projectiles that were used in the Yom Kippur War in 73 by the Egyptians, and the guy would direct it with a little joystick onto the top with a piece of wire. It was a Saga missile, that's right. So they used Saga missiles, but we were able to suddenly drop the fire, and we knocked those Saga installations out, and then the armor just went. And we lifted our fire as they went, and lifted our fire, and they were using their machine guns and spraying the area, and there were enemy troops still around there. And the strangest thing I saw was that these enemy troops would go close to the road, and the road, because of the type of semi-tropical area, the roads were built about a meter higher than the surrounds. So they would come in and sort of take cover right at the road, and the armored car would drive forward, and these guys were taking pot shots at the armored car, but small weapons, so the stuff bouncing off. but the armored car couldn't depress those machine guns low enough. And so they had to back off and then redo it, and a couple of high explosive shells, and they sort of kept it clear. And then, of course, as it went, the infantry crossed over, and that was it. And that was on the Friday. Midday Friday, we got the message. Now we're out of what little ammunition we had left, because we had been shooting and firing at machine gun positions on the other side of the Near River. And I had no food left and no water left, neither of us, and getting a bit skraal and the rumble in your stomach. And your full van der Westhuizen and said, okay, guys, you can come down now. I'll meet you at the bottom. So Yorful came in his Land Rover, and we sort of rolled down that hill. I can tell you, I had no more energy left at the end of Mere. And he was waiting for us in the road at the exact position as discussed. And without any food or water for us, I must tell you, we're disappointed. But he said, listen, guys, I've got to just take you to have a look at what you did. And he said, you did an amazing job. And so he turned the Land Rover around, and we went and had a look we crossed over the bridge now on this wooden bridge, and we went to look at the position that we've been taking out. And I've never seen anything like that. You can look at the history books, you can go and watch these movies, but it was just crater after crater. And the craters were deep. Those 5.5 when they exploded, some of them were deeper than a human being. And the trees had been mown down by that airburst. It was like devastation. There was a movie I'd seen a year or two before. It was called Apocalypse Now. It was something like that. And the most awful thing was that there was still a tree and a tree there. It's like the Battle of the Somme, where you get a tree sticking out of nowhere. And there were human body parts hanging. You know, it's an awful feeling, because I sort of grew up, you know, don't kill your fellow man kind of thing. And here we had slaughtered, I mean, literally slaughtered. The official enemy death toll was 360, I think, but there were more than that. And basically, yeah, that was the battle for the bridge. I had a couple of contacts in artillery afterwards, towards the end of January, and then we were told to come back, and we handed over to, still inside Angola, to a civilian force artillery unit, I think it was Cape Field, and we went home. I got home in March, and having left for the border in late August, early September, and all the while, no contact. We had no cell phones, obviously, and couldn't get out of mom and dad, and there was no postal service at that point anymore. It's quite a traumatic reunion, where my parents came to fetch me at Potch, and they were told we'll be back in the early days of March, and they went home. And yeah, but the interesting part is, when we demobilized back at Grootfontein, we were again called into the hangar, and we were told, okay, you can get back your browns, chuck all these old uniforms. And remember, we had one change of clothing, no change. It was just that one kit that you were issued with for all those months. And of course, it was dirty and stank. Well, I couldn't smell myself, but anyway. And we got brand new uniforms as well, and we had a shower. They had these portable showers, and I think PW Buerta was again back in that hangar with General Milan and I can't remember who was the head of the army at that point. Yeah, General Fullion was there, and they thanked us profusely. And they said, unfortunately, we don't have money to pay you. We ran. So, but he made a speech, PW. He said, look, we've asked Parliament for more funds allocation. We'll try and get you your money. But in the meantime, boys, he said, I'll guarantee you all a job in the permanent force. And we're going to give you a pen. A Parker pen, and it will be engraved with thanks from the military, which I did get. I don't know what I did with it. But you've got to sign another non-declaration again, which we did, a second one. Yeah, we left and came back home. I did get in the post a message by telegram in those days, saying, please come collect your pay at Defence Headquarters, which I did. And to my great surprise was a huge sum of 3,600 Rand, which was enough to buy me a motor car, a brand new Alpha Sud, and had to have a bit of change as well, I must tell you. But it was a lot of money in those days. And he's also said, guys, look, we're not going to call you up for any camps for a good 2 or 3 years. You've done more than done your part. But 2 or 3 years later, the call-ups did come, and it did happen again. And so, Chris, that is my story of the battle.
And I must tell you, I love speaking to the Savannah people. You people have a maturity about you, which is fantastic. Because how old were you at that stage when all these things took place?
I was 18, and I turned 19 on the day we had that one contact, the 1st of December, turned 19. But I had one advantage, which was quite interesting. I went to Pretoria Boys High, and it was compulsory to do cadets. So I learned to, I might have been one of those strange kids, but I was a little bit parrot when I did cadets, and I could drill. By the time I got to the military, I could do the most difficult drill maneuvers, which obviously is about turn on the march. And all I can say is a bit of luck. My Form 1 schoolmaster was Captain Eddie Penzorn, later to become Lieutenant Colonel Eddie Penzorn. And he taught us cadets and drill, and I was pretty parrot. After school, I never saw him again until we had our 40th Savannah reunion at Everton House in Centurion, and it was a 2-day affair. And there was a guy helping behind the bar, an elderly guy, and we all had our name tags. Of course, they didn't. And he came over to me and said, I think I know you. I said, well, I don't know you, but who are you? He said, I'm Eddie Penzorn. So that was my schoolmaster. And, I just thought, I may, possibly the discipline I learned from him got me through Savannah. And yeah, because I learned a lot. I learned about weapons there. Okay, I made a few mistakes here and there, but I survived. And yeah, so Eddie Penzorn is now living in Australia. I still have contact with him. He's retired, and that's what it was. Yeah.
Well, we must tell the Colonel if he's listening. Yeah, we would want to speak to him as well.
I'll get on it, yeah.
But while I have you here, what shirt are you wearing? What is that?
Okay, so this is the shirt that we made for the Savannah guys, and so it's got Savannah. That's the official Savannah calthrop, if you know what a calthrop is, and that's the 4th Field Regiment emblem, and we try and wear these together. We get together so everyone looks the same. And okay, the bats would have a little bats, parabat logo on the shirt, and the infantry slightly different. But yeah, we all have a great common understanding, all gone different ways in life. Those guys that have fallen on hard times, we try and help to our best of our ability. And it's a bond that we have, yeah.
How many of you are left alive?
The figures seem to be dropping, but we've got about 160 scattered through the world. They get our newsletter. And when we have a big reunion, maybe 80 or 90 guys, and some guys come from far that can get there, come along, and we have normally a 2-day affair, bit of a get-together on Saturday, and then a formal Thanksgiving parade at Footrekker Monument. Just remembering that there were 38 guys that passed away during Savannah, and all their names are read out, and a wreath and a cross is laid in memorial. So we try and remember, and back at our first reunions, we used to sometimes get some family members, but obviously that has diminished greatly. There are hardly any family members. We just did of interest have one Jewish guy killed in action, and I'm still in contact with, to an extent, with his sister and his cousin and a very good friend. And I'll send them pictures of are they the Hebrew, well, not the Jewish cross, but the Magen David at his name, yeah, that's what it says.
This reminds me of your friend Larry Sagat. Now,
Yeah.
where did you find out he's not dead? Because people thought he was actually one of those killed, but he wasn't. He survived somehow.
Yeah, there was an error. He was an infantryman, and they had a contact, and nobody was quite sure who it was. And somehow a message was about to be sent back to his parents that killed in action, but he wasn't. And so he's still with us today, yeah.
When you were doing those calculations by hand, I suppose, there were no computers or calculators or anything, all just paper.
Yeah, it's paper, but there are the range manuals, and the range manuals are actually based on trigonometry. So if you understand a sine wave and a cosine wave, which is why math was important for us, you'll understand that the trajectory of the projectile follows sort of a sine wave effect. And you could do a calculation without those range manuals, with a slide rule. If you knew how to use one or had one, I did have a slide rule, and I could, but to use a slide rule and do the manual calculation, it's very tedious. So you don't have that kind of time, and that's why we have the range manuals to assist. And of incidents, I bumped many years later an engineer from Arms Corps who was designing the final G5, G6 gun, and they were busy doing the range manuals for those guys. and he asked me just to have a look at it, compare it to the 5.5 range manuals, and funny enough, somewhere on my shelf behind me, somewhere, I've still got my training files of it, the TA training files in it, where we had to fill in and the exercises and add in the Coriolis effect, add in a bit of this, add in a bit of that to get to the final figure that goes out to the gun position officer. Yeah.
But it must be warm in that cubicle where you're sitting. I mean, there's no aircon in that day, man. How do you work?
It was very, very, that was my problem. So I'm claustrophobic. I wouldn't go in a submarine if you paid me. So the TA van was the size of one of those field ambulances, but it was just inside, and there was across the one side was a flat desk and 2 chairs and an opening on the top, which was closed with a shutter sometimes. And what would happen, the 2 TAs would sit there at their plotting boards, and the first guy to come up with the answer would shout their figure to the gun position officer, who'd stand on a chair, stick his head up, and shout the info to the gun commander. So he would say, okay, this is the bearings, this is the latitude, longitude, and this is the type of charge they want, and the projectile they want. And that would be loaded. So it would be either those bags, low, high, whatever was required, the range. And the guy would then say, okay, he's ready. And the gun position officer would then call me on the radio, the OP on the radio, and say, okay, gereed. And we would wait for the exact precise moment, okay, so, and say, okay, fire for effect. So depending on how many rounds we needed. So we would say we need 15 rounds. 15 rounds, fire for effect. And then they would just carry on and readjust after every round those bearings, because the gun does move a little bit when it discharges. So that was how it operated. Today, I guess drones, computers would make it slightly different. But yeah, that's how it was. Because you've got to remember that the guys on the guns can't see the target. It's indirect fire, and they're firing blind, and you're the eyes, the OP's the eyes of the artillery, and you've got to have a visual. You've got to get and see that target, and there's no other way of doing it. And the closer you can get to the target as an OP, the better. But of course, it gets a little bit dicey, getting too close to the target. As well as in those days, the radio was big. It had that long aerial. It's about 3 or 4 meters long, and it's a flap in the wind, and so easy to identify as that's the signaler for the OP. It got hairy a few times, but we're alive.
There at Breach 14, you said to me that the Cubans actually suspected or knew you people were close by observing, and they were firing for effect, I suppose, upon you.
Yes.
Were you guys trying to find their observers as well, or do you think they were not as far as front?
No, they had withdrawn from where we had put our gun positions, and it was the most obvious place to put those gun positions. So they had registered those gun positions targets. So they withdrew to their new positions on the other side, blew the bridge, had these positions registered, and that was why that first night was hell, because they were firing at night, and they registered their our targets, already, and that was one of the mistakes going into previously used gun positions which have been registered. But when we got a target, an enemy target, a Cuban target, we would say, okay, register that target. So that, and we would give it a name or a number. And if we had to go back to that target, or if they sent another gun into that same dugout position, it would be a simple task of saying, okay, target registration 42. And you didn't have to go through that whole calculation that the TA would have to, you could get the round off straight away. So, yeah, that's how that operated.
You know, it's fascinating. While you were talking, I was thinking when I was now in South Africa, I recorded somebody. Well, I recorded so many people, so I might be wrong, but I believe it's General Karls de Wals. Was
Yes.
also a paratrooper, and he was around, and he's actually the one who gave Bridge 14 his name. Now that you're talking about registering.
Yeah, registration targets. Yeah, it was quite interesting. Following when we were still up there on the bridge, we sent a section or section and a half of parabats went out to the pig farm or the cheese factory. And I think one of the pictures I sent you was me with two of these parabats on either side of me. So that picture, it's the first time I'd bumped them since 48 years ago. And when I never came with this shirt. I came with my fourth field artillery shirt to that function that day. You can see in the picture. And they came with their bats. And the one guy comes up to me and he says, were you at Bridge 14? I said, yeah. He said, who was the damn OP at that bridge? I said, I'm sorry to tell you, but it was me. He said, did you try and hit us at the cheese factory? I said, yes. And the issue had arisen because everybody had sort of scrounged their own uniforms. And you couldn't sometimes tell enemy from friend. And I got the message saying, okay, vijandelijke beweging down there. So we started having a go at them and with these 5.5s. And we started getting closer and closer. I moved it in. And out of the blue, somebody said, "Stock for own troops," you know. And those two guys were there. And they said, we were trying to get one of them, Tommy Fullier, to talk. He said, you cannot believe what it's like to be on the wrong side of those 5.5s, and especially as the thing's getting closer and closer and closer, and there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide. And that picture, that we had a raffle there that day, and they both said to the big joke, I just am holding up a little piece of paper. They said, if you win the competition, we're going to go and hunt something in the bush, and you walking in the front, we walking behind. This time you're in the front, and yes, we had a bit of a laugh there, but it was a bit more serious at the time.
Now, this reminds me, you sent me another picture, and it seems like Israeli paratroopers, 1967. What's
Yes.
the connection?
Okay, so the connection there is those three guys in the center were the first three guys to liberate the Wailing Wall. And it's a famous photograph, the original one. And it was quite strange. My brother-in-law in that picture, and his wife, my brother-in-law was a lieutenant in the SADF in his day, a bit younger than me. His wife is born in South Africa, but an Israeli, and she has something to do with the military. And she got to hear that they were going to make a documentary of those three guys at the Western Wall. And she knows that she somehow was involved in the film industry in Israel. And she sent a message to them that we were going to visit the war that day, my wife and myself, that they've got an Angolan war veteran coming as well. And funny enough, they knew about that war that we were to, because they'd obviously served more and more, and they said we'd like to meet them. So that was how I got in that picture. And those are the original 3 guys that liberated the war. And that's why I said, a few years after that, I went to a talk in Johannesburg, and the main speaker was the guy that took the photograph. And I knew he was going, so I took that original photo of those 3 guys, and he autographed it for me, but he subsequently died. But I have a photograph somewhere of me and him, him autographing that picture. We had a long chat, how he took the picture with his Hasselblad camera, which they used in those days. And he just lay on the ground, and these guys had just got to the Western War. And as you know, Jews were, up till that point, they couldn't go and visit the war for many, many years. And so regarded as one of the most holy sites, as the most holy sites in the Jewish religion. And you can see from the original photograph how they gazing up at that war in absolute awe. Here they've done it. They've fought through those trenches, past the Jordanians and the Egyptian forces to get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we did that. It's strange how life works, isn't it? When you were telling the story of Charles Fortune, for you people who's a bit younger than us, that was just man. Fantastic cricket commentator. He was also a headmaster or something in Grahamstown or someplace. Real English guy, but he spoke. Man, if you wanted to watch cricket, that was the guy to do it. Those guys came later, but they weren't in the same class. He was just fantastic. So I can imagine how you must have felt, because right in the beginning when Legacy started, we had a young woman on called Sharon. And she lives in the US as well. And she started a song. She started singing a song which became known as the Battle Song of the Lombard River or something like that.
Correct, yeah.
And it's because the guys were sitting in the rattles and they were listening to a song called Starry Night, Starry, Starry Night. And so she wrote the words. I can't play it for you guys on YouTube because, the YouTube, almost hate the word assholes, the YouTube people will come down on us for copyright and things, but go and look at it, try and find her online. It is fantastic. It must have felt very strange. I mean, just like, how did you feel afterwards? Very unreal or what?
It was such a strange thing, because less than a year ago, I was sitting at school, writing my matric school exams, and I came from a school. We weren't left, we weren't right, but the right were frowned upon. So it was tending toward a little bit towards the liberal side, but they did insist, do your thing. It is the law of the country to do your military service. That was it. My father, a lawyer at the time, also didn't quite agree with it, but you've got to do your thing. You've got to pay your tax, you've got to go and do your military service. And so that was the encouragement in our family, to go and do your thing for the country, and then you can study. Of incidents, I worked a few years later at the Nuclear Research Institute in Pelindaba, and there again I had to go and sign the Non-Disclosure Act again. And funny enough, they when I signed it, I was at work at the reactor that day, and when I got home, my mother said, there were some guys came here in ties and suits, and they were from some special unit in the police, and they wanted to see your room. So I thought, what do they come to look for? You know, scope photographs, maybe. There are pictures or communist material. I mean, of which, you know, we didn't believe in communism. Or definitely not in my house, I promise you that. But they were quite happy. My mother told them that, yeah, I'd served in the military in Angola, and then they realized, okay, been there, done that, and I think they must have gone and seen that I had signed previously a non-disclosure act. It's all on record back still in those days. So, you know, that of incidents, I was working there when South Africa detonated the first atomic bomb. And I remember being on the bus, and we listened to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Pik Botha, defending the action at the United Nations and saying, we don't think we have, and whatever, but we became a superpower. And the intention many years later was the G5 was developed, supposed to have been developed to be able to deliver a nuclear warhead. So, yeah, it all ties up into that same artillery sort of thing, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I must say, we would like to talk to you specifically about that type of your life, but I'm not sure if it's possible. Because there's a lot of rumors. For those people who don't know, let me explain again. I was the other day, somebody wrote to me from Hong Kong, of all places. And I don't know how she ended up there, but she's South African, but small. She's in her 20s now. To me, she's a child, but she's a grown woman. But she doesn't really know the history anymore. She said her parents went to Australia, blah, blah, blah. Now and she's watching Legacy. She really likes watching Legacy. And she's welcome. So I just want to say to her that the scope we're talking about was like a girly magazine, very censored. You couldn't really see all the body parts. I'm not going to go into that, but this was like a very strict country. It was almost, you know what, these things didn't happen outside of wedlock, and if it does and the worm catches you, well, the shotgun wedding was totally arranged, things like that. And then South Africa actually had nuclear weapons, and they had the capability to actually deliver them. And they're the only country in the world, as far as I know, who actually voluntarily gave up their nuclear weapons. I always laugh when I say, you know, the US and the West mistrusted the ANC so much, even in those years, that they would not allow these guys, when they came to power of Mr. Mandela, to have access to nuclear weapons. And luckily, it seems like the Mandela people were not wanting nuclear weapons anyway, so they got rid of them. But if it's possible in the future, I assure you, Gary, we want to know about that part of history, because we hear all sorts of stories. Like you just said, when the first one was detonated, now there's still confusion if it actually was or wasn't in the Kalahari or somewhere down in the South Atlantic or... Anyway, that's another episode.
Something detonated two. One was in the Kalahari and one was in the Atlantic Ocean. And I think they were delivered via aircraft at that point, but it all came from Pelindaba, originated. And if I'm not mistaken, those shells are still somewhere in storage somewhere. But with, So, but I think the level of radiation that South Africa can produce now is purely medical grade at the moment. We were not close to that high enrichment 235 that Iran and Iraq is trying to get to.
Yeah, well, that's our problem, you know. I was thinking of a Vela incident now, which you will know what I'm talking about. For the rest of you, perhaps we can get the man to speak to us and other people. The problem is, and it's a bit off topic, but I have to say it here. What will happen to Israel, the Jewish state, if Iran gets hold of a nuclear weapon? What do you think is going to happen? Will they use it?
It's always been a threat, and it always will be a threat. But I've got I have friends who are in this special service. Kids have been in special service, not in Mossad, but in one of the other units. They weren't allowed to go forward. Just of interest, there was a Mossad agent. I'm getting on to serious stuff. Who lived in Pretoria, and her name was Sylvia Raphael. And if you know the story of Sylvia Raphael, she lived down the road from where we live now in Pretoria when she retired. She was not Jewish, but she had an affinity for the Jewish way of life. And she was recruited, and she became one of their top assassins. And where she came unstuck was after the Munich massacre, Israel said, we will get every one of those swap, or not swapper, whatever the group they were, PLOs, I think they were, it was PLO. We will get every single one of them. And what happened was they slowly took them out, and I think she was involved in 3 or 4. But then they got to Norway, where they thought they picked up a terrorist acting as a waiter. Now, I've seen the movie, the documentary, which has actually been removed off worldwide, because there's still an operative's name and face appeared in that movie who's still active today. So I'll tell you about that shortly. But anyway, so they took out this guy, and it proved to be the wrong guy. Anyway, these Mossad operatives were caught. She was caught also, and she was sentenced to 5 or 10 years in it was called the Lillehammer Affair, the town of Lillehammer. And she landed up, there was a trade-off happened between Israel and the PLO, and she got out after a year or 2. And she then went on to marry this guy who was her defense lawyer, called Schut. And if you say it in a South African way, it comes out as shit. So her surname became Schut. They lived down the road, and my wife and my mother-in-law physiotherapists, and they work from home. And she became a great friend of my mother-in-law's, and they used to work from this. Well, my wife still works from here. My mother-in-law is now retired, but they both knew Sylvia very, very closely, as well as the husband. And she contracted leukemia, Sylvia, and she was put up in the hospital down the road, the Zuid-Afrikaans, which is 700-800 meters from where we're sitting now. And my mother-in-law was with her when she passed away, and her remains were repatriated by the Mossad, although she's not Jewish, and her remains are now buried at kibbutz somewhere in Israel. And when we can one day get hold of that movie, the movie was actually made by a guy in Cape Town, and it went on to be about to be shown in Israel at various movie houses. And the first showing began, and the audience was watching. Now, I'd seen it already a few times, and the audience was watching, and the Mossad bust in, and they said, no, it was banned, and it was withdrawn off all public sites. worldwide. So you can do what you like. The name will come up, but you won't be able to watch it. But there is a move to have this movie opened up. It's an incredible movie of undercover secrecy and strange coincidences. And that is a story of Sylvia. My daughter, funny enough, in Israel, is involved in some group that the head of it is an ex-South African lawyer, and he has the movie. And my daughter is desperately trying to get it back for me to show it again. But it's an amazing story of her life and times. There is a book out on her, but it's very far from the truth. It was written by one of her handlers in the Mossad. But yeah, so what I'm saying to you regarding that nuclear part of that Israel's up against, they won't ever let it go to fruition. And we've seen it over the years. Suddenly there's an explosion there, suddenly the underground explosion, and now they're putting this nuclear reactor so deep underground that the American rockets can't penetrate that concrete from above. But we have to have faith.
Yeah, that's what I keep on saying to people here, is that if there's one country in the world, and I'm of course very sympathetic to the Jews because my wife is one, and besides that I have, my grandmother, people like that, and traditionally the two countries used to be close together.
Yeah.
There's one country in the world who can't afford to lose a war. It's
Correct.
Israel. You lose a war, you're dead. There will be nothing left of you. It will be the camps again.
Absolutely. No, there is no plan B. There is no second chance, I'm afraid. But got confidence. But just getting back to your Jewish backgrounds, Chris, I've got a book on my shelf called Bura Yoda. And it's written by a guy in Johannesburg called David Sachs. And it's an autographed copy I've got. And it documents the Jewish guys that fought in the Boer War. And if I tell you the figure, you'll be amazed. There were over 300. And each one's name is documented and where he came from. And there's some amazing guys. Some of them were confidants of Paul Kruger, and he relied on them. And most acquitted themselves admirably. And there were even a couple from Pretoria area. And it's an amazing book. If you ever get to read it, or I'll get it to you somehow, Bura Yoda. Incredible stories.
Well, as we always say, we have a Joiki in the Springbok rugby team, we normally win. We want to say to people something. Hello, guys. Must be
Get going. Get on the rugby pitch again.
Yeah, no, that's true. But you know what? There was actually a Jewish doctor in one of the concentration camps who did fantastically well. He treated these people while he was dying himself. But thank you so much, Gary. You know what? Sorry, we still haven't said your name correctly, so just tell us who you actually are.
Okay, so my surname is Nowosenetz, and as you'll see it there, it's actually Lithuanian, but I'm a fourth generation South African, so my great-grandfather came from Lithuania to avoid conscription by the Tsars back in the late 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s. Yeah. So here we are.
Oh, yeah, we know. Now we know. I'm still not going to try and say that. I can just imagine telling a teacher what your surname is. He says to you, okay, spell it. That might have been a thing. But anyway, thank you so much.
I'll give you one last story here. So we get to the military, and they have a list of the names, and they're calling out, and it's alphabetical. And it goes Netlin, Nivo, whatever, and it comes down to me in the bombardiers. It says, "Wat die fuck is dit?" So I said, it's me, Bombardier. So he says, is he a fucking Rus? Now, you got to understand that we were fighting communism at that time, and the Roy Khafar and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, this guy that they're presuming is a Russian. Yeah. But anyway, that was what it was. But yeah.
But seriously, Gary, you were never discriminated against because you're Jewish. I mean, just because you sound like a damn Russian. I mean, that we can understand.
I can tell you now, I was never discriminated against. In fact, I never, although I come from an Orthodox background, I'm not very observant, but I came from an Orthodox background. And I was booked for anything. So, and I think that is what they respected. Everybody expected, if you could do your thing, you're okay, yes, some were chip out, I do know, and went the easy way, but it wasn't what I was about. It's not what I learned at school, and it's not what I learned at home. Okay, you'll do your part. So, but of interest, the bottom line is there were 24 Jewish men killed during the border war. They're all documented. There are 20 tombstones where the cause of death is in South Africa is noted. There are 4, unfortunately, who no cause of death on the tombstone, and there's a guy living in London, Victor Kramer. He's researched this, and he came to the conclusion that these 4 that there's no cause of death, their files had been sanitized by the SADF. What reason, we don't know. But I don't want to cause trouble with family, bring back old bad memories. It's not worth going into that kind of thing. But yeah, so we tried and play. We played our part as much as possible.
Well, you certainly did, and as I say, you guys are always welcome at Legacy. For the rest of you out there, guys, you're welcome too. You can also come here. You don't even need to speak at all. You can speak English. We will accommodate you. Come and join us. Come and tell your story. Actually, James, this is important because really there are people dying. I don't wish it upon anybody, but I do know that there are sometimes regrets. I've spoken to generals. They can't come on anymore because they're too old and they're too feeble. And they say to me, you know what? I wish I could have come. Don't let that happen to you. Come, you're welcome here. Just contact me, get hold of me. Gary, once again, thanks, man. Mazel tov and all what is good to you guys' website. And I hope to see you soon again for another episode.
Yes, thank you, Chris. And take care, friend. And my regards to your wife as well.